Okay, this is chapter 6.1, using the properties of exponents in real life scientific notation problems. This will be your number 2 recording for scientific notation. It is on the back side of your notes. It's from page 298, example 5. In 2003, the population of the U.S. was 2.91 times 10 to the 8th. In that same year, the total motor fuel usage was 1.70 times 10 to the 11th gallons. Estimate the average number of gallons used per person in the U.S. in 2003. All right, the first thing I would encourage you to do when it's a word problem, instead of just thinking it's too hard, is to give yourself a simpler problem. So if, for instance, I used the example of 20 gallons of fuel and 10 people, well, if 10 people use 20 gallons of fuel, I'd go 20 divided by 10 and get 2 gallons of fuel. So I took the total amount of fuel, so that was the fuel usage, total fuel usage, and then I divided it by the number of people, but in this case it's population because it's much larger numbers. And the fuel is going to be 1.70 times 10 to the 11th divided by or over 2.91 times 10 to the 8th. I always like to start with the simpler one, which is 10 to the 11th over 10 to the 8th. And one of the reasons I do that, you have the quotient of a power property, and that's because they're the same bases. I have 11 tens in the numerator and 8 tens in the denominator, which is 3 tens, 10 to the 3rd. The reason I do that is because when I calculate the 1.70 divided by 2.91, I want to have 3 digits past the decimal. And so when I plug this into the calculator, I get a whole lot of decimals. The only thing you have to be careful is to round correctly. So it's 0.584, which is going to be, excuse me, is going to be on the calculator 0.5841, so on. But that one that comes right after the 4, it doesn't ask you to round, so it stays 0.584. So you would write this in scientific notation as 0.584 times 10 to the 3rd. But that's not in correct form. So not in correct form. In order to be in correct form, you actually have to have a single digit, not the number 0, but something from 1 to 9 right there. So we move the decimal over 1. So it would be 5.84 times 10 to the something. Now, we know that when you multiply 0.584 times 10 to the 3rd, it moves the decimal 3 places. So it's 584. We want to know what I'm going to, in order to write this correctly, we want to know what power. We're going to multiply 5.84 times 10 to the what power to get 584. Well, it would be second power because you're moving it 2 places. You either go up from 10 to the 3rd to 10 to the 4th, or you go from 10 to the 3rd to 10 to the 2nd. So this is the scientific notation way of writing it, and this is the actual numeric way. And since it's asking us the average number of gallons, then we would write 584 is the average number. 584 is the average number of gallons per person in 2003. Okay, we're going to go on to the next example at the bottom of the page. And this problem is an extra example. It says a fleet of tanker trucks transported 4.47 times 10 to the 7th gallons of fuel in a year. If the fleet had 3.7 times 10 to the 2nd trucks, estimate the average number of gallons transported by each truck. Okay, you're going to write a ratio for the average. This is a unit rate. Whenever you say per person each truck, this is going to be a unit rate. Probably learned about unit rates in the 7th or 8th grade. And they can be solved using proportions, but for this it's best just to set up the ratio when you've got scientific notation. So I want you to try to solve this. Please write a verbal ratio, and then once you have finished, or if you get stuck, I want you to turn the recording back on. And once you've finished, again, check it. But if you get stuck, turn it on and help yourself. Okay, hopefully you used a simpler example. For instance, if you had 2 trucks and 100 gallons of fuel, you would take 100 gallons of fuel divided by 2 trucks, which is 50 gallons. So you take gallons of fuel divided by number of trucks, which means you have 4.47 times 10 to the 7th divided by 3.7 times 10 to the 2nd. I would start with the simpler, the 10 to the 2nd over 10 to the 7th over 10 to the 2nd, which is the quotient of a power property. You have 7 tens in the numerator and 2 tens in the denominator, which leaves you with 5 tens in the numerator, 10 to the 5th. 4.47 divided by 3.7 is a big, long number. You need 5 digits past the decimal because you have 10 to the 5th. So you need 5 places because you move that decimal 5 places when you multiply by 10 to the 5th. You did have to round this one. It went 1.208108, and that 8 told that 0 to go up to a 1, so it's 1.20811. Make sure you round correctly. When you multiply 1.20811 times 10 to the 5th, that's the scientific notation answer. You get 120,811. Then you need to write it in a sentence. The average number of gallons transported by each truck is 120,811. This concludes the recording for the number 2 recording for scientific notation.